Welcome to the Millennial Rant, a podcast about whatever's bothering me today. With topics ranging from politics to pop culture, there's a rant to cover everyone. For more Millennial Rant content, you can join me on the web at millennialrant.com. I realize with this video that I am establishing myself as extremely behind the times, but I've never prided myself on being an early adopter, so I'm not particularly upset about it. Additionally, I feel like a year is a long enough time for the genuine, bizarre polarization of this movie to have died down. You got people on all sides, right, who were saying that it was a horrible movie that was, treated men terribly, and it was a bad representation of society and culture. And you've got people on the other side who are saying it's a masterpiece, that it truly captures the experience of being a woman and all these sorts of things. And so I wasn't really interested in seeing the movie when it came out because of everything that I heard about it. I was interested in the movie up until I started hearing about it. And the reason why is because I am a huge Barbie fan, right? I grew up with Barbie. I love the movies that they did, the CGI movies. I never understood why they did it straight from CGI instead of doing 2D animation, but I guess this was around the start of Pixar, so maybe they were trying to be ahead of the times. I don't know. Whatever the case, I really loved those movies. Not all of them are masterpieces, but pretty much anything with Kelly Sheridan in it is my jam. So I was very excited when the Barbie movie was initially announced, because I was like, oh, this is going to be great. A Barbie movie like along the veins of maybe what they'd been doing with the movies with Kelly Sheridan, maybe with what they have more recently been doing with the television show, which I actually really enjoyed as well. This idea of Barbie as a real person living in the real world with her real friends and all that sort of stuff. And then I found out that it was going to take place in the Barbie world, and then I thought we were getting a live-action version of Barbie Life in the Dream House, which would have been absolutely beyond the charts phenomenal, okay? Like, it would have been hilariously great. Like, I would have loved that so much, right? And then the movie actually came out, and I had been traveling with my mom up until that point, so I didn't get to see it. And so my sisters were going to take me to go see it on my birthday last year. And then the reviews were coming out, and they were very mixed. And they were talking about how they unironically used the word patriarchy and all these sorts of different things. And so they decided they didn't want to see it, and I wasn't going to go see it by myself. And by the time I had the opportunity, I just kind of just slipped away, and I really just didn't care. I was very glad that Margot Robbie was cast as Barbie as opposed to the original person, who I think is a comedian. And anyway, they picked a really good actress to portray a real life Barbie. And I talked about this in a previous video about Barbie and how she's not a real person. She's a cartoon, and she's not supposed to look like a real person because she's a cartoon. But I think that as far as bringing to life the real life Barbie, picking somebody like Margot Robbie was a good choice. She looks like what a real life Barbie would look like if Barbie were a real person and not a cartoon. So that, props to that. Always very glad about that particular casting. Shoot, what's his name? I don't remember. He was in The Notebook. Ryan Gosling, right? As Ken. I thought he was a little too old for the part. He didn't look like, quintessential early 20s Ken. So those were my initial thoughts based off of what I knew about the film and what I'd heard about the film. I wasn't particularly enamored by the idea of the film, and so I just kind of kept putting off watching it. What has since changed, however, is I spent 8-ish hours on a plane coming back from the United Kingdom. I was only able to try to sleep for about 3 hours. I don't sleep well in a moving vehicle, if at all. I have to be so tired that I basically just black out. And so I gave up after about 3 hours, and then I had another 5 hours that I had to fill. So I ended up watching the Barbie movie. And I didn't hate it, honestly. From a fan's standpoint, it wasn't really that great. It didn't really scratch my Barbie itch, if you get what I'm saying. Just to go through it as a fan first. I wasn't particularly thrilled with the way that they laid out the Barbie world. That everybody was Barbie and every guy was Ken except for Alan, which was kind of funny. Also, Alan being a martial arts boss was really out of nowhere and totally cool, and I'm behind that. But I wasn't a fan of the whole there's only Barbie. Everybody is Barbie. And there was, a throwaway where this is Skipper and a throwaway where this is Midge, but they only chose the pregnant Midge, and there were a lot of different types of Midge. Just like there are a lot of different types of Skipper. There were a lot of different types of Teresa, a lot of different types of Nikki, a lot of different types of all of these different characters. There wasn't just Ken. There wasn't just Barbie. There was a whole entire cast of characters that was just ignored. And one of the things that I really liked about Barbie Life in the Dream House is that Barbie was Barbie. And, she was a doctor. She was an astronaut. She was a vet and a stewardess and all of these different things, which was hilarious because it played into the context of the stories. And Skipper was Skipper and Chelsea was Chelsea and Stacy was Stacy, and all of her friends were her friends. They were all their own individual people. Ken was Ken and Ryan was Ryan, and Raquel, her name, I almost said Roxanne. Raquel was Raquel. And none of that was in the Barbie movie. It was, you were Barbie or you weren't important. It's very clear to me as a, literature, English person, as a communication scholar, and all these sorts of aspects, as a storyteller in my own right, that this movie was designed to be satire. That does not mean that humor is not involved. It's just that humor is not the point. Satire is designed to be a social commentary, not a funhouse mirror, which is what parody is in a lot of cases. And so this came off more as a parody in its execution, with, I believe, the intent of the creators being satire. And because of that, it really failed at both. So where it succeeded as satire was in the first part, act 1 of the film in Barbie Land, where stereotypical Barbie is going throughout her stereotypical day, enjoying her stereotypical life, and then something happens. Her feet go flat. She starts thinking about death. She starts having these non-stereotypical Barbie thoughts and feelings and actions occurring within her. That's funny because it is a commentary on how reality is not Barbie Land. Where the satire breaks down is in the real world. Because from the moment Barbie enters into the real world, everything is hyper exaggerated, not necessarily in a bad way at the start. So when it begins and she and Ken are rollerblading their way through LA, and they're very confused because people are catcalling them. Ken feels like he's being seen positively for the first time. Barbie feels she's being seen negatively for the first time. And so the hyper exaggeration of the people around them, the way that they're behaving, the way that they are interacting with Barbie and Ken, feels real because we're looking at this through Barbie's point of view, right? Barbie is seeing this for the very first time. And so for somebody who's experiencing catcalling for the first time, somebody who's experiencing, discrimination or demoralization or whatever for the first time, it's going to feel hyper exaggerated because you don't have a point of reference. I was fine with that. Where it really breaks down in the real world is when we get to Mattel. And it's just absurd. Nothing in Mattel in any way reflects reality. The men are stupid. They are incompetent. It does not have any sort of real world connection. And so what happens is we leave Barbie Land for what's supposed to be reality, but what we end up in is a funhouse mirror warped reality. And so the satire breaks down and it becomes a parody. And because it becomes a parody, when we go back to Barbie Land and they're trying to bring back this satirical element to recreate the commentary, because Ken has appropriated Barbie Land for his own purposes. Spoilers if you've never seen this movie, by the way, but I feel like you're this far into the video, you realize that I'm going to be talking about the whole thing. So Ken has appropriated Barbie Land for his own purposes, saying that he's going to institute the, quote, patriarchy, where men are, the ruling class and women are the subjugated class, whereas previously the Barbies were the ruling class and the Kens just kind of existed and simpered and whatever. And so what they're trying to, portray is this idea that reality is this world in which men are all powerful and women do nothing but simper and kowtow to the men. Because that's the way it was in Barbie Land in reverse. It didn't work because we'd already been introduced to the parody element. And so the attempt at returning to satire felt disingenuous. It felt less like satire and more like they were trying to make a documentary that this is what life is really like in the real world for women, even though we saw their real world and it wasn't like that at all. And so when we get into the part where stereotypical Barbie is having this psychotic breakdown because she just wants everything to go back to normal, or she just wants to be human, or whatever it is that she ultimately is going through this for, there's no real investment because it's not parody, it's not satire, it's not a commentary, it's not taking itself literally, it's not taking itself seriously, it's not taking itself even humorously. There's no all the way tone for this movie. So let's look at it structurally, right, from a storytelling point of view. This is structured as a voyage and return and or there and back again story, depending on which terminology you use. I prefer there and back again. Christopher Booker uses voyage and return, and there's a whole bunch of different, literature scholars who use their own terminology for it. Now, we know the voyage and return or there and back again story pretty well culturally, right? It's literally the purpose of The Hobbit is it's the subtitle is There and Back Again, A Hobbit's Tale. So, but it's also used a lot for satire. And of course the best known There and Back Again satire is Gulliver's Travels. And I think that this was trying to be a Barbie version of Gulliver's Travels. So the way that the movie is structured is Barbie is perfectly happy in her normal everyday life. Something unexpected happens and she loses herself. And the only way that she can find herself is to go on this voyage that she doesn't want to go on. It was not necessarily her choice. It was thrust upon her. So she goes on this journey to the real world, and there she discovers a world that is entirely different from the world that she left, in such a way that she doesn't know how to handle it. She doesn't know if she should fit in. She doesn't know if she should change. She doesn't know if she should fight it, if she should accept it. And that's very common for There and Back Again stories. You're put into a position where the culture and the expectations are outside of your understanding, and so you behave as far as you understand, but it doesn't conform with the new reality. Again, this breaks down in that her interactions with the characters who are taken seriously, which is America Ferrera's character and the daughter's character, whose name I don't remember. I was that uninvested in her. She was incredibly stereotypical, very uncharming. And I will say that the actress did a fantastic job with what she was given. She was just given a lot of garbage. America Ferrera her character was done extremely well. I felt that, she was very typical, middle class, having problems with her preteen teen daughter. Very, very typical, but I don't think in a necessarily bad way. And if only because her circumstances are ones that I think most moms would be able to relate to. But the big problem is the bad guy in the movie was Mattel, and specifically the Mattel board of directors. And it was just done badly. It was not, they didn't feel like a real threat. They didn't feel like a real anything. There was nothing real about these men, the way that they were portrayed, the way that they were acting, the way that they were interacting with the other characters. And that, I think, is where the story really breaks down. Because, as in any There and Back Again tale, Barbie has to go back, but she goes back too soon. If this had been truly committed to being a There and Back Again story, Barbie's breakdown would have occurred in the real world. She would have had to have dealt with the real world consequences. She would have had to have found herself in the real world and then go back to Barbie Land. This was done really well in Arnold Schwarzenegger's movie, The Last Action Hero, which is basically this story done exponentially better. Anyway, so we get back to Barbie Land, and Ken has taken over. All of the Kens are now, subjugating all of the Barbies and everything. We get this really weird, really honestly kind of dumb solution where America Ferrera's character has to deprogram these Barbies by telling them how difficult it is to be a woman, which none of these Barbies would know because they don't have any problems being women because they live in a fantasy. It was dumb. It was dumb. And you couldn't take it seriously because we had already broken down the satire and turned it into a parody. And so you can't tell if we're supposed to be taking it seriously. I couldn't take it seriously. It all just was so ridiculous, if only because that wasn't my experience of being a woman. And so maybe I'm just not the target audience for this movie. Ultimately, this comes down to, it was an interesting concept. They tried really hard, but the execution was really bad. You either have to take it seriously as a satire the whole way through, which is impossible, or you have to disregard it as a parody the whole way through, in which case it completely loses any purpose. Or, yeah, really, those are the only two ways. For me, it's a take it or leave it movie. I have no real deep feelings for it. in any way. I think it was badly done. I think that it could have been done a lot better. And I think that if they had done it a lot better, it would have been a much better movie and also a much better satire. They would have been able to get their point across and also been able to connect better with the audience because it would have met audience expectations. The things that I really did genuinely have a problem with were the treatment of Barbie and Ken's relationship, where Barbie just kind of goes along with it and Ken is so wrapped up in his identity as Barbie's love interest. But I'd already seen that in Barbie Life in the Dream House, where it was done way better, where Barbie genuinely did appreciate and love Ken, even though Ken's only purpose in Barbie in the Life in the Dream House is to be there for Barbie. They actually had an episode of Ken trying to go out in the world and, quote, make something of himself, but in the end he kept coming back to Barbie to help her or to be there for her or whatever the case, because his job is to be there for Barbie. So I'd already seen it done better. So it just fell flat for me. I also really didn't like the way America Ferrera's character's husband was treated. He was a complete throwaway, and when he was on screen, he was treated in the same way as the CEO of Mattel. There was no real difference there. His intelligence was downplayed, assuming he has intelligence at all. He was, scolded by his daughter for culturally appropriating by trying to speak Spanish. And yeah, I didn't like it. I did not like that at all. I didn't like any of the interaction with the dad. I just was not a fan. The fact that America Ferrera is like, he'll be fine, not even thinking about, not gonna tell him that we're running off to a completely different imaginary world. Don't know how long we'll be gone, but he'll be fine. I mean, presumably they're only gone for a couple hours, so he doesn't need to call the police or anything, but like, what if they've been gone for days? So he's just still sitting there at the kitchen table trying to teach himself Spanish? I don't know. So, yeah. I mean, again, it's just one of those movies that you either take it for the mess that it is or you leave it for the mess that it is. And as for me and myself, I'm going to leave it for the mess that it is. I don't need it to occupy my life or my thoughts or my feelings or whatever. It has no real bearing on me and who I am. I didn't learn anything from it. I didn't lose anything from it. It's just a movie that exists, that I've seen, and I'll probably never see it again.